All right, we're back, and it's COMP397, Week 2, Lesson 2, Part 2, 222, right? And I want to talk a little bit about JavaScript fundamentals, right? Because you guys don't have a lot of JavaScript that you've done before. We talked about it briefly last week, how I'm going to be using something called Typescript, which is kind of a superset for JavaScript. And again, the place you can find that is typescriptlang.org. We're going to be learning how to do object-oriented JavaScript this way. But first, before we do this, you need to know a little bit about the basics of JavaScript. Otherwise, you're going to say, he never taught us JavaScript, but somehow he expected us to program in it. Right? So we don't want that. So we're going to start off at the beginning. We'll do a little bit of PowerPoints. I'm not going to read all the slides. By the way, you have all this stuff. And if you notice, there's 152 slides. I am not going to go through 152 slides. I'm going to zip through some stuff that you should know already, right? And so please excuse me now, and I apologize in advance if I go quick, because I want to cover the basis. If you have a question, pop your hand up and I'll discuss it. Otherwise, I'll move on, right? And again, I'm going to be switching between views, so bear with me as I move between this and the view we have for Visual Studio. So JavaScript, what can I tell you? It was made back in the day, 1995, 96, back in the days of Netscape. A little bit of a background. Originally it was called LiveScript, which I actually think might have been a better name at the time, LiveScript. But Java was a big thing back then. Right, Java, and it was starting to come out. And because Java was so, popular, they moved the name to JavaScript. And so people confused it for a long time. They thought JavaScript and Java was the same. Who's ever done? Did you guys have do any Java yet? You may have not. Yeah, you may have done. I mean, it's all C-influenced languages. Each one of these. When you do PHP, JavaScript, Java, Swift, even any of these things, C#. You'll notice that each of these things, they're all C-influenced languages. C was made back by Carnegie and Ritchie, but right now it's moved into this, this latest form where we have a lot of C-style syntax for our languages. Like, for example, curly braces, the way we do for loops and all these different structures, they all took from the original C language, just like JavaScript did. As you can see, I'm skipping. I'm not going to read everything here. A couple of things that JavaScript does allow us to do is it allows us to do selections, or if you want to talk about, we can access content with JavaScript. We can modify content with JavaScript. I like those two things. And it talks here about how we do that. And there's different ways of targeting the content that we're going to be using through the use of IDs and classes and so on. You can do that with JavaScript. And so it gives us a little bit more interactivity. And originally, JavaScript was used for that, to give interactivity to your pages. I'm going to move forward. I'm not going to talk about this stuff too much. But one thing it does allow us to do is react to events, right? Which is something that we're going to be talking about more here in this class. So again, what's an event? Something that happens when you do something. All right, really, that's the it's triggered. So you do something, an event is triggered, and then you have some kind of response to the event. Actually, it's all around messaging, right? When I click something, or if I move my mouse, or I click a keyboard key or whatever, anything I do there generates a message, right? That's what happens, a message. And that, by the way, it's all the same whether you do things C#, like you guys did a little bit of Windows forms in C#, yeah, right? By now. So when you do a Windows form, you create a button in C#, same idea. You create an event that occurs, you trigger an event, you have an event listener, and then you have an event handler, right? There's two pieces to it. In C#, it's hidden. It's all one. You double click on the control and bop, it pops up an event handler. We're going to create the event listener on our end. The actual thing that, we're going to kind of create the code for the listener. So again, any one of these things it creates an event, or for example, a cursor hovers over an element, information is added to a form, whatever. Any of these things is it creates almost like an event. Now, it depends if we want to listen to all of these events or not, but these are all things that are firing or triggering all the time. So again, let's look at these 4 things when we talk about JavaScript. Access, we have access to content on the page. Modify, we're going to do that. There's going to be program rules or instructions that we're going to use to change things. And then we're going to react to events that are triggered by the user or the browser, right? These are all 4 things that, even though we're not just doing pure JavaScript, it's exactly the same, whether we're doing it here or for a game, right? So here's some examples, a slideshow. The React piece is a script that's triggered when the page loads, right? We can react to that. So when the page loads, we can put a script in place for it to kick off, right? Or some kind of script that triggers when the page loads. Access, we want to get each of the slides from the slideshow, right? Modify, only show the first slide, hide the other ones, right? These are all things that you can do with JavaScript. I'm not going to go through all these examples. The one we care about, if I go through this thing, is of course HTML5 Games. And here's this Starbase 12 game that I kind of put together, right? Again, React, a script is triggered when the page loads. Access, preload game assets in preparation for play. Modify, show the game intro screen and wait for the player input. React, wait for the user to click the start button, and so on. These are all things we're going to be doing with JavaScript. I've talked about this HTML5 and CSS. We can't do JavaScript without knowing a little bit of HTML5 and CSS. You guys did a little bit of that with COMP397 web interface design and COMP397, which is advanced web design, I think it was called, or web. But we need to kind of do a refresher on some of this stuff because, and of course my PowerPoint slide is all messed. Whenever I do stuff in front of you, it's messed. When I do stuff at home, it's perfect, right? And that's okay. I don't care. Well, actually, I do care, but I just try not to say that I care. Okay, anyways, but take a look at this. Here's an example of, if you look at the bottom, if you guys can see this is actually supposed to be up higher. If you look at the PowerPoint presentation. But there's different things that are part of your HTML that is highlighted here. So here, this p tag is the opening part of your tag, and this \p is the closing part of your tag, right? And then, of course, you have an attribute name, class, right? And your attribute value, which is fruit, right? Well, all of these things we can access, we can modify with JavaScript, right? We need to know about these things. Same thing goes with a class, right? When we use CSS, the dot in the CSS tells us it's a class. This is the selector we're looking at, fruit, right? Here's the attribute we're changing, or property, color, and we're changing it to pink fruit, right? So this kind of stuff that we do with CSS and HTML5, you need to have this structure in place in order for JavaScript to work. Now we're talking about JavaScript, but the amount of CSS and HTML5 you'll be doing in this course is minimal. I got to put it up here so you've seen it, right? Just in case you want to go back to it. This is kind of a neat reference card that you can look at from a PowerPoint presentation. I'm not going to go into too much detail about HTML5 and CSS because it's kind of out of scope for the course, but I put it in there as a good reference. Let's talk about JavaScript a little bit. When we declare variables, right, we have to use the var keyword, right? And one thing I need to talk about with JavaScript is an interpreted language, which means it's not something that's compiled like C#, right, or Java. JavaScript is interpreted by the browser. So when the browser loads its JavaScript, it loads it up and it goes, hey, what is this stuff I'm seeing here, right? Kind of thing. One other thing that you have to know is JavaScript is case sensitive, like C#, right? Other languages like VB and so on, they're not case sensitive. You can make the same identifier, and this is the identifier, small number. Small number is the identifier for the variable name, or variable name. And if you notice, what kind of number is small number in this particular case? Ali, what kind of number is small number? What was that? Integer. Integer. How do you know that?
It doesn't have a decimal.
It doesn't have a decimal. Well, guess what? JavaScript knows that too, right? In fact, if anything, it's inferred, right? We do type inference in JavaScript. We don't actually define the type. We don't say, like in C#, integer small number equals to 4. We're using here our assignment operator equals to assign the number 4 into the memory location that is, we have an alias for. Small number is the alias for the memory location that we're assigning the number 4 to. We're actually putting number 4 into that memory location, right? And we need to use the var keyword, proper way of doing JavaScript, by the way. If you don't use the var keyword, it'll assume you're declaring the variable. But when we do variable declaration, we need to do this var, and we don't have in JavaScript any way of knowing what kind of data type it is. Although, again, we do type inference with data type with JavaScript, and so JavaScript does have variable types. It's just that it's automatically done as opposed to explicitly done. So implicitly, or if you will, it's inferred when you assign a string to a variable that it's a string type variable, right? But we never actually say it's a string in JavaScript. When we use TypeScript, which I'm going to try and move you towards, I'm going to push you towards TypeScript, we do have data type declarations. And as we move towards ECMAScript 6, which was what JavaScript is based on, as well as Java, C#, and a bunch of other languages, as we move towards that, and we're supposed to move towards that standard by the end of this year, right? That's what they say. It may not happen. But as we move towards that standard, you're going to see more and more that JavaScript will change, and we're going to move towards JavaScript that has an option to use data types. All right, so here's an example of some HTML5. And again, where do you want to put JavaScript in your page? Again, traditionally, you might see that JavaScript is put up here, right? I highly recommend that you don't put it up here for your JavaScript, that you put it down here inside the body of your document. And I think we talked about that last time. The reason why we want to do that is because if we put it up here, the JavaScript has to execute before the body of your document is loaded, which sometimes can go towards slow loading times, right? Especially if your JavaScript is very big. So I recommend your JavaScript at the bottom of your script as opposed to in the head of your document. All right, and here's an example of that, right? This is one thing we don't want to do. You could write everything we do here in this course, you could write it in line in your index.html document. We're not going to be doing that. We're going to have a document that works separately. One thing also you'd never want to do is document.write. Why do you not want to do document.write? Who knows anything about JavaScript? Okay, none of you know anything. That's okay. Document.write actually rewrites the DOM. We don't want that. We never want to use document.write with our JavaScript because it can totally mess you up. And this is just an example of how we are accessing the document object and using the write method of the document object to send in a hello and a hello world in this particular case. Okay, so a little bit about JavaScript. There are different types of document types, if you will. This had been the standard for many, many years, this doc type with HTML 4.01. And then we moved, of course, into, you might see these XHTML1 transitional different document types. But of course, what we want to move into is this type of document down here. It's hard for you guys to see it, which is just HTML, right? So when we do our document, which we're going to be planning, is we're going to be doing HTML5. So all you need in your doc type is HTML. All right. What it says here is basically that it's a complementary language. Again, the majority of what we're going to be doing is in JavaScript, but we need the index.html to kind of connect everything together. All right. So our index.html document is the thing that connects our CSS and our JavaScript together. If you don't have your index.html document, then your JavaScript is just JavaScript in the ether, so to speak. So what we need to do, though, is we need to use our document to connect all these piece parts together, and we need a place for our game to run, and it's going to run in the canvas element, right? And you might not see, it's way up there, but it's because of that our projector is a little bit off. All right, I'm going to move on because you guys are getting bored. Couple things to know about JavaScript. You can't force JavaScript on a client. That means the client can totally deny. He can say, I don't want to use JavaScript. And then your game is done, right? So it's possible. I'm just letting you know, right? You can't guarantee data security. That's another one. So, if you're looking at guaranteeing data security with JavaScript, right now, you can't do it. And the other thing that JavaScript has a real problem with is crossing domains, right? Well, there's something that really takes care of things for us a lot, and I recommend highly, if you're going to use JavaScript for things like cross-domain scripting or anything like that, you're going to use jQuery. jQuery fixes a lot of this problem, right? So this same origin, same domain policy is really, really important. And sometimes what we want to do is, you'll notice it when we use things like images. The stuff that we're going to be doing in our games, you need to run it on a server. Speaking of which, is a good segue. Every assignment that you get, all right, just letting you know this in advance, you need to run it live, okay? That means you have to get some server space at the school. You guys all have server space at the school, right, as students? Yes? Does that mean yes? You need to have that. So if you haven't kicked it off in a while, or if you need to re-sign up or something like that, please do so, because you need to get that done. You can also use the stuff that we're going to do at GitHub. You guys all signed up for GitHub, I'm hoping, right? So GitHub also gives you some GitHub pages. We'll talk about that as we move forward. So move forward and talk about your environment. We're going to be using ASP.NET and JavaScript. One thing I don't want you to do is, there's different ways of kicking off Visual Studio. And one of the things I don't want you to do is use the, I'm just going to go back to Visual Studio. So join me here on Visual Studio for a second. And actually, let me just change my resolution. When I'm in Visual Studio, I'm just going to kick off another project for you guys, right? We talked about JavaScript a little bit. And again, guys and girls, we may not cover every aspect of JavaScript today, and thank God, because it's 152 slides. I'm not going to go through 152 slides with you. It's not going to happen, right? But we will cover it here and there as we go. Again, I'm in Visual Studio, and I want to kick off. I'm just going to kind of kill some of these things. I want to kick off a new project. There's different ways of doing it, again, just to remind you guys from last time. One of them is File, New, Project. That's one way to do it, right? The other one is, in your project start page, you can click New Project. Each one of these things works just fine. I'm going to go this way today. I'm going to go File, New, Project. I'm not going to go File, New, Website. File, New, Website will not give us the environment we need. All right, so let's do File, New, Project. I'm going to call this thing COMP397 Lesson 2, and we're in Part 2 right now. So Part 2, Lesson 02, Part 2, right? I'm going to move this up so you guys can see it a little bit. That's what it's called. If you notice, I have Create New Git Repository, and the only reason why I have that is because last time I selected Git as my default source control. I'm going to select, under the Visual C# templates, I'm going to select Web, right? If I open this up, if I kind of go into this container, Web is the template I want to choose. I want to choose ASP.NET Web Application, right? And then I'm going to press OK. Now there's a bunch of different choices you're going to see. You're going to see different templates. Please don't choose any of the other ones. The one you want is empty. And you want to press OK. All right, when we create our empty project, you're going to see something like this. I've just unpinned it so you can have more room to see here, right? You're going to see your Solution Explorer window on the right. You might see some other toolboxes and stuff on the left. But the thing we want to look at here, if you look at the top right corner of your solution, right, you have your solution up here and your project here, right? Remember, when we create our template for the first time, we're going to do this a couple times now, and then eventually I'll show you how to create a template, right? I want to almost create my boilerplate, if you will, or the thing that starts me off all the time, right? So one of them is I want to right-click here, and I want to create a new, we're going to go Add, New Folder, right? And the folder we're going to create is called Scripts. This is where our Java scripts are all going to live, right? The next one is we're going to create another one. This is the top-level folder we're going to do here. We're creating our scaffold, if you will. And this is going to be called Assets with the lowercase a. So Scripts, Assets. We're going to make another one. Just to keep with the Visual Studio type, we're going to make this called CSS for now. So CSS, where our CSS pages are going to be. You can name these whatever you like, but you need some kind of scaffold, some way of folder structure, if you will, to keep everything. And you're going to get marked on this, right? So if your folder structure is like really out of whack or doesn't make any sense, you're going to lose marks. Okay. Under assets, let's go down there. I'm going to add a couple more like I did last time into new folder. I'm going to go images, right? I'm going to do the same thing. Assets, add, new folder, and I'm going to go audio. You can also call that sound. Assets, add, new folder, fonts, even though we may not have any fonts today. I want you just to show you this structure here. Under scripts, add a new folder, we'll call that lib, right? And that's good for a start. So these are kind of all the folders we need for now, right? So scripts, lib, assets, you have audio, fonts, and images, and CSS, you have nothing. We also need some kind of central document, and I talked about this. Every website has that. Normally, if you're making an ASP.NET website, you can use default.html. We're going to be using index.html. So we're going to right-click on our project again. We're going to say add, and we're going to go to HTML page, and we're going to just name this index. When we do so, I'm just going to zoom in here so you guys can see this. Sorry, I want to make sure we're not cut off. I'll pull it down just a little bit. All right, so if you notice, it comes up with a doc type of HTML, which is good, right? And this HTML piece we don't need, so we're going to get rid of it. This piece, this attribute, we're going to change this to language is equal to English. In the head of our document, we have to also describe some metadata or microdata, if you will. And we're going to do that by saying meta character set or char set is equal to UTF-8, right? Because this UTF-8 is the encoding for our character set, so it tells browsers that we're HTML5 compliant and which character set we're going to be using. The other one is for mobile devices. We did this last time. Name is equal to viewport. We're kind of defining our viewport size. And content is equal to, if you notice it pops up, width is equal to device width, initial scale 1. The reason why it's kind of going over to the next line for me is because I've made it really big. If I go smaller, then you notice it goes back to the regular line. I'm just making it big so you guys can see it. I just do line wrapping here for you guys, right? Okay, so these two things, meta character set UTF-8, meta name viewport, width is equal to device width, initial scale 1. And then our title, which is going to be what we're doing today, which is COMP397, and then it's lesson 02, part 2, because first part was just describing our tools. All right, one thing that we're missing as we go, and I recommend that you put it either underneath the HTML document or within the HTML tag itself, is some kind of comments as to who you are, what's this thing about, blah, 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 because I'm gonna get you to do internal documentation. And the way we do that, of course, is less than, the less than sign, exclamation mark, and dash, dash. It creates these comments. That's the comment style that we use in HTML, right? And we're going to put in there, our author name, which is me. You can put your own name, right? You want to kind of put what's the program type or whatever, my app. We're going to call this, our create.js boilerplate. Again, we're going to do this a bunch of times, guys, so don't worry. If you don't know how to do this, or if you're losing it, you're going, what is he doing, right? It's okay. We're going to see it again and again, so don't worry about getting confused. I want you to practice now. Don't watch me. Practice what I'm doing, because when it comes to your test, you won't have time to figure this stuff out, right? You need to practice now. We're in class, so when it comes to test time, you're good, right? Okay, same thing. We're going to go into the date, and again, this might be the creation date or whatever. Whatever you want to call it today would be May 12th. My God, May 12th already. 25th. This is the last day of free parking, I hear, right? Anyways, May 12th, 2015. So a little bit about you, right? And maybe a little description about you. Probably put some kind of description here, about what the app is about, right? Ow. Right, and again, you can put whatever you want in there. Of course, I spelled template wrong. All right. These kind of comments we're going to need. Let's put another comment underneath our title, right? Again, comments are ignored by the interpreter, the browser, right? They're just ignored. They're just there for us, for programmers to understand what we're doing. And one of the comments I want to put in here is maybe this will call this the Css section. So if we had more than one CSS file, it would go here, right? We don't have any CSS. Let's add one in. So I'm going to right-click on my CSS folder. I'm going to go Add, and then I'm going to go Style Sheet, right? And under Style Sheet, I'm going to put in, of course, main.css. You can just put main by itself. Main will give us this body tag with nothing inside of it. Let's leave it as is for now. And we can drag and drop this main.css underneath the CSS section comment like this, and it'll create a link to the CSS file. Remember, our index.html page, this is a great example of that, is our central document that links all the other things together for our game, right? We did this kind of last time too, right? Okay, in our body tag, we need, and this is in order, right? We need a canvas element when we do all of our games and everything else are played in our canvas element. So let's do that. So we're going to create a canvas element. So we're going to say canvas, right? And in our canvas element, we need it to have an ID. For now, we're just going to call it canvas. You can call it whatever you like, arcade, whatever, like we said before. It needs a width. Let's make that width 320 for now, like we did last time. And let's make the height specifically 640. Oh, sorry, 480. I'll be all right. And we'll close it off. Now, the canvas tag is just a container tag, right? We'll never actually populate anything in here. The canvas tag is like a div tag. It creates a container for where our game is going to live, right? So let's do that. This is our, I'll make some other comments here on the top. This is our game container. Right, that's really what this is, our canvas element. Down here, I'm going to make some space. This is our JavaScript section, if I can spell. And this is where we're going to link all the JavaScript for our games, right, in here. We don't have any scripts right now. One of them, what we want to do is, I want to right-click and add under the scripts folder. We're going to right-click and add a Typescript file. Now, even though we could add a JavaScript file here, I'm adding TypeScript because we can do JavaScript within the TypeScript file anyway, right? So I want you to get used to using TypeScript, so might as well just from now start creating it with TypeScript. If you weren't going to use TypeScript, you'd use JavaScript, and that would be perfectly fine as well. Let's use TypeScript. Now, I asked you for the file name. We're going to call it game, right? This is where we're going to house everything for ourselves. For now, when I ask you this question, just press no, right? And if you notice, I get this split window between JavaScript and TypeScript. You may not. You may see just this, right? That's perfectly fine. It's still doing it. My version of Visual Studio 2013, the way I've configured it, allows me to have this preview window on the right. All right, I'm going to make this a little larger for you, right? Oops, it's too large. And move this over to the right so we don't see it too much, right? We're in the game.ts file. We'll go back to my index.html. I need to link this game.ts file into our index.html in order for me to use it. So I'm going to just drag and drop it here. And if you notice, like last time, it converts the TS to the JS, right? Because, again, your browser doesn't read TypeScript. It only reads JavaScript. And TypeScript translates or transcompiles, I love that word, transcompiles your TypeScript into JavaScript anyway. Okay, cool. Saving everything, right? I'm just kind of forming our scaffold. Now this is good, but I think what I need to put is another little comment here that says these are our game scripts, right? Under the JavaScript section, I'm actually going to put in some libraries, JavaScript libraries, right? And the libraries we need for TypeScript, we kind of saw them for create.js. We saw them last time, but we'll do it again. If I go to createjs.com, I need to download the following ones. Easel.js. If you haven't done this already, I would download it right now. Download each of these zip files for Easel.js, Tween.js, Sound.js, and Preload.js. Download them all, right? These 4 different libraries. And when you do so, they're going to look like, not like that, that's for sure. That's what happens when you're doing Mac and Windows. They're going to look like like this. So here's my Easel.js master. When you unzip it, it'll look like this, right? Assets, build, docs, examples, and so on, right? We need to do this for each one of them, all right? So I'm just going to minimize this for a second. Just like I did last time. We're just building this out the same way, slowly, as we did last time, so we have access to all these libraries. Okay. I'm going to go into my lib. Underneath the lib folder inside my Easel.js master, if you haven't done it already, right? We're going to drag and drop our Easel.js-0.8.0.min.js file. And min stands for minified version, right? You could also take the unminified version if you go up online into the GitHub link for Easel.js, which you could certainly find if you want to actually look at all of the libraries. We don't want to do that here. We're not going to be developing anything for Easel.js, so this minified version is just fine. Do not take the combined version or the next version. Next means it's the next beta version that they're making for Easel.js. It'll be slightly different than what we do, so I recommend just to stick with this -0.8.0. Okay, and drag and drop this into the lib folder in your scripts folder. So this is the structure I'm talking about here. So under lib, there's Easel.js 0.8.0.min.js. All right, I'm going to do the same thing for the other ones really quickly. The next one is Tween. I downloaded Tween.js. Here's my Tween.js. And I go into my lib folder, and I'm going to do the same thing. Here's my minified version of my Tween.js, dragging and dropping that. And the same thing goes with my Sound.js. This is where we had trouble last time. I know how to fix it. We're just going to grab this sound.js-0.6.0.min.js, put that in there. And the same thing when it goes to, for my last library for now, which is going to be my Preload.js. Preload.js. So I'm going to go into my lib folder, grab my Preload.js, and now I've got the entire suite of libraries for my Create.js framework in place. Are you guys with me? I'm practicing with you here, right? Because I want you to see this a couple of times, right? So you understand how I build this thing out. We need to build this structure in order for you to use the library, all right? So I've got 4 JavaScript libraries that we're using to enhance our ability to manipulate the canvas element. That's what it does, right? All right, cool, we've got them here, but you know what? Our document knows nothing about them because, you know what, we haven't linked them into our index.html. So we're going to link them in order. So I'm going to drag and drop this underneath the JavaScript section. Same thing in order. So Easel first, then Tween, then Preload. Then Sound, then Preload. Sorry, the Sound first, and then Preload in this order. And if you notice, our game.js is down here. Why? Because we have to put these first so that our game.js file will know about them. If we don't put them in this order, if we put these underneath this, it'll never know that this exists. It loads them in this order. The interpreter loads them up and includes them inside of our document in this particular order. Okay, but because we're using TypeScript, this is where we ran into issues last time. We need to use something called type definition libraries because we have all these classes that are included in these script files. But in order for us to get code hinting, which is why we use TypeScript in the first place, the main reason, good code hinting, right? Tooling, if you will. They call it tooling as well. We need to have these type definition libraries that define the classes that are inside of these documents, right? This is where we get them from NuGet. So we're going to go to Tools. We're going to go to NuGet Package Manager. We're going to go to Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. Right? I'm going to pause here so you guys can see what I'm doing. Tools, NuGet Package Manager. manage NuGet packages for solution, right? You guys see that? Click. When you do that, if you have a good connection, it'll come up with some solutions. Just wait till it loads. If you notice, it says, I'm online with NuGet.org. When I want to go here in my search, I want to search for easel.js. So I'm going to go easel.js, right? Here's easel. When I do that, if I've done it correctly, this easel.js, this blue easel.js will come up. I want to click on it and install. It'll install into my lesson a couple of things. Let me just close this for a second to show you what it installed. It installed into my type definition library my createjs.lib.d.ts. It installed into my easel.js under typings, easel.js.d.ts, as well as tweenjs.d.ts. The D stands for definition, right, for TypeScripts. Okay, so typings, this whole typings folder was actually created by my NuGet package manager. And this is where it sent all these. Right now, we have enough. We have enough right now to get our game going without sound. But we want to add sound. This is the tricky part we found last time, right? So we need to do the same thing. We need to go to Tools. We're going to go to NuGet Package Manager. We're going to go to the Package Manager, Package NuGet, Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. And when it comes up, we're going to put in sound.js. Sound.js, right? When you do that, this sound.js comes up, and this is where we ran into trouble last time. I'm going to fix it for you. It needs a little bit of scripting we're going to do, right, for a second to fix it. But once we do this the first time or one time, it'll be done, and we'll remember how to do it for the next time. I'm going to click Install and press OK. Yeah. What was that? For what, sound? All these easel.js preload sound and no, you're gonna have to watch the video, man. I can't do it again from scratch. I'm kind of behind. Okay, so then if you notice, it adds all these things in here, but I'll show you where to get them. All right. It adds a bunch of these typings in here, right? I'll let it do its thing, right? We don't need all these things though, and we'll see that in a second. The way I got that, just to let you know, see how we're getting this red underline showing in the error? We're going to fix that error in a second. We're going to go to Tools. Tools, NuGet Package Manager. Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. And we're going to look for, again, we're going to look for the last one, which is preload.js. And if you notice, preload's already been added in, right? But just to show you that it's there, if I go preload.js, right? If you notice, there's a check mark if it comes up. Sorry. The reason why it doesn't come up is because it's already loaded.
I don't see any errors.
You will. But preload.js has already been there. It's already been added in from sound.js. See right here? Our web audio gives me all these errors, right? If you see these errors, which you may, I do, right? The reason why you're seeing it is because in our sound.js typing, so if I actually double click on this thing, sound.js.d.ts, let's take a look at what a type definition file looks like. What does it do? It says, here's another reference path for web audio API, waa.d.ts. Just wipe that out. You don't need it. And save.
Even if you don't have an error?
Even if you don't have an error. You will have an error later on. All right. So that's the first thing. And then see this web audio API? Right-click and delete. And same thing with the web RTC. Right-click and delete. You don't need these two things. And then you won't have any errors. So in our typings, all we have is create.js lib, easel.js, preload.js, sound.js with a little squiggle for me, tween.js. We have all these, but we don't have the other two things that were loaded in by the sound.js files. And all I've done is remove the reference path to WAA. I'll bring that back. I'll just undo here. I remove this path here, web, and on line 17, a reference to this web audio API waa.d.ts. I just remove that, right? I don't need that for our purposes here. Are we good? Don't worry if you didn't capture it. It's on the video, right? All right. Once we've done that and we've got our libraries working, we still can't use them until we reference them in our game documents. We have to go to our game.ts file now. Here's our game.ts file. And what I want to do is I want to take all of these and one by one drag and drop them across like this. It creates a reference. Sorry, not these. I'll be okay. These ones, drag and drop them across, right? And it creates a reference path for our typings, right? Same thing, so in order. So easel first, then tween, same as we did the other ones. And then after tween, sound. And after our sound, it's going to be preload. I'll make it a little smaller so you can see how it doesn't, oops, the other way. Are you with me? All right, we do this because these reference paths inside of our game document, what it does is it gives us the code hinting we need so we have tooling for our new, the new framework. All right, let's go into this. A couple things I want to do here. Right, I want to do at the top of my files, I want to create some comments. Again, two forward slashes is a comment style, again, for single line comments for JavaScript. So we're going to put in, these are our game framework variables, if you will. All right, and one of them is, it's a global type variable. We're going to declare it with the var keyword. Remember we talked about variable declaration with var. And then we're going to call this thing canvas, right? Right here in the declaration, we're also going to assign it, right? We're going to say document. We're going to use the document object, get element by ID, right? And we're going to target the canvas element that we've defined already. And if you notice in my index.html, we define this canvas element with a canvas ID. That's all we're doing, right? We're just targeting that element. Right? This is our game container like we talked about before. Right? So that's the first thing we're doing. Are you with me? Next one. We need to define a stage. Even though we have our canvas element, we need to be able to control the canvas. And we do that by defining a container for all our games and everything else we're going to do. We use this stage container that we're going to create. So we're going to say var stage. Right? And this is where we're going to use TypeScript for the first time to define our types. The way we define our types in TypeScript is we use a colon, right? And then from there, we're going to start typing. If you've done this correctly, all up here, and you've done what I've done over here, you can do this. Start typing create.js to get some code hinting. You should get this create.js right now, right? If I just start typing, right? Create.js dot, and then what you want to do is type stage. Right? So create.js stage. All we're doing is we're saying, hey, let's make a global variable that's going to be available to our document that is the stage that we're going to put our game, make our game work inside. Okay, that's what this thing is. Okay, so those are two things we need for now. We're going to get other things eventually, but for now, those are the two main ones. All right, now we need to define some kind of initial function that we run. We're going to call it init, right? So we're going to say function. When I say function, the keyword function in JavaScript is like a method in C#, right? We have to use the function keyword to identify that it's a method, right? And then the next thing we're going to do is name it, right? Init, function init, right? We also need to kind of put two curly braces to say to the interpreter that anything between these two curly braces is part of the function. From a scope perspective, variable scope, anything we declare inside these curly braces, inside of our functions, just like in C#, the life cycle of our variables live and die within these curly braces. That means if I define a variable in here, it's not available out here, right? Okay, so that's why I created stage and canvas up here. They're on the global scope. They're not inside any function, right? So they're not encapsulated someplace that their life cycle is going to end and die inside. In here, we want to use this, the stage variables. We're going to say stage is equal to, we're going to create a new object, new stage object, but it's going to be of type create.js.stage, capital S. inside of there, it's listening for a canvas element. This is the canvas element we've defined that points to our canvas tag on our document, right? So we're just going to put canvas in here. So we're saying this. We're saying let the stage variable, the stage container, if you will, let it be equal to the canvas element right now. Now we can't see the canvas element, but we will in a second. I'm going to use some CSS we did last time, right? In here, after we do our stage, we need to define a couple of things. If we're going to have any mouse clicks at all, this is something we didn't do last time, I want to type the word stage. And if you notice, because I've defined it as a type of stage, I'm going to get some tooling now. This is what I've talked about, this code hinting that I normally wouldn't get in JavaScript at all, right? I need to press the dot, we use the dot accessor method, and in here, if I start typing mouse, right? If you notice, it gives me some options: mouse children, mouse enabled, mouse bounds, mouse move outside, all this kind of stuff. I want to use mouse enabled. When I say mouse enabled, stage.mouse enabled, if I go, that's cool. If I go mouse again, right? I want to enable mouse over. That's the other thing I want to do. I want to enable mouse over. Let's do mouse over, enable mouse over, right? Inside there, I want to put a frequency of how many times I'm going to check when I hover over something, right? I want to check 20 times per frame, or 20 times per second. That's going to be the frequency for now. That's pretty good. You don't want to go higher than this. The reason why is because we're playing a game here, right? And the more things you do every frame, the slower your game responds. So we're going to use enable mouse over. So if I want to make any buttons, when I hover over them, then the hover effect will work, right? Otherwise, if you don't include this command, no hover effect for buttons. Okay. Next, I'm going to use a static class, create.js.ticker with a capital T. Our ticker is a static class, and what we're going to do is we're going to set the frame rate, frames per second to 60. So we're saying our typical game frame rate for games, 60 frames per second. Right? Frame rate. Frame rate. I want to remember frame rates. Add to dictionary. All right. And then, after I've done this, I want to create an event listener. And in JavaScript we did last time, we did create.js.ticker. We're accessing the static class ticker again. And what we're doing is we're saying, I want to create a listener. So I want to use the on method. You can also do this. You can also say add event listener. This is the old way of doing it, add event listener. I don't recommend, if you might see some examples online where you see add event listener. That's the old way of doing things. I highly recommend you don't use that at all if you do see examples like that, but rather use the .on. That's the more modern way of doing it. It's the same thing, but adds additional functionality. And on tick, this is the tick event that we're listening for, right? Then I want to hit the game loop. Every time, on every tick, I want you to access this game loop callback function. Now we haven't defined the game loop callback function yet, right? And we're going to do that down in here. So we're going to say function game loop, and inside our game loop, so basically every tick, that means 60 times every second, we're going to go to this game loop function. This game loop function. We're going to keep going to it every time, every 60 times a second. Why? This is going to be the way we refresh our stage. We can't refresh the canvas, redraw it is what refreshing means, unless we go to our game loop. And inside there, of course, we're going to say stage.update. So we're going to update the stage. We're going to refresh the stage, 60 frames per second. And just to see what this is, I'm going to put some comments in here, and I'm going to say something like this is our main game loop. Refreshed 60 frames per second, right? Okay, cool. So we've done this. That's cool. Well, yeah, we can refresh the stage, but then afterwards we want to do some kind of main game function. And usually I reserve that for the I call it main. I'm going to access a main function. I don't have that right now, so I've got to kind of create it. I'm going to go down here and go function main, right? And this function main is where we're going to put. I'm just going to kind of pull this up here. This is our main game function, right? This is where everything, all the magic happens in here, right? So again, I've got our canvas ID, our canvas element. I've got our stage, right, as an example, and then I've got our I'm accessing the stage and the ticker and all that kind of stuff in here. And here's our game loop where we're running this 60 frames per second. And in here, our main, we're going to just to test it, we're going to say console.log, game is running. We did this last time, right? So if everything goes well, this is good. If it gets down here. But here's our problem, right? We've done all this little piece of code here, right? But in order for us to get to this thing, even though if I go back to my index.html page, here's our index.html page, even though it's here, right, I never call my init function. I never call it. You can't run the init function without calling it. Now there's different ways of doing this. One way of doing this is creating a self-executing anonymous method. We don't want to do that yet, right? Because I'll confuse the crap out of you guys and you'll all run away screaming, right? So instead of us doing that, right, we're going to build up to it. We're going to include it in our body tag. When the body loads, I want to call the init function, right? So let's do that. On load, that's an event listener. When the body loads, call the init function, right? The init function, this init function, right? The init function is going to call when the body loads. When this function goes, it's going to set up my new stage object. This is our stage object, right? It's going to enable mouse over. It's going to create the ticker. It's going to listen for each tick. It's going to go to the game loop 60 times per second. It's going to happen in the background, right? And then it's going to go to my main and pump out console.log game is running. That's what it's going to do one time. Okay? If all things go well. Now, in previous classes, you may have seen something like this. Go to debug and then go start without debugging. That's Control F5. I don't recommend that in our class. We need to go to Google Chrome, just actually start. That's why my browser is Google Chrome. You can set up whatever default browser you like. Some people like to use Internet Explorer because it's the worst browser, right, for now, right? I'm just saying, right? And again, you know what, we do want to cater to lowest common denominator. But one thing I want to tell you is this. I don't want you to target Internet Explorer anything earlier than IE9. Okay, so if you want to make your game compatible, right now we're not targeting anything before IE9. Right? So if someone says, hey, is your game working in IE8 or IE7? Absolutely not. And you know what, guys? We don't care if it's that far back for now, right? But for now, I'm using Google Chrome as my main browser. You can do the same. If I press this play button, that looks like a play button here, or debug, then it's going to bring up this. And if you notice, it's blank, right? Why? A couple reasons. One, we haven't put anything there, right? And the second thing is we haven't outlined it, which we will in a second. If I go to this hamburger, that's what this thing is called, this hamburger in Chrome, or the sandwich, if you will, and you go back to more tools, and you go to JavaScript Console, this is the main console we're going to be using. Don't worry about this right now. If I refresh, this is going to be the main console we're using to define to kind of do our troubleshooting. Game is running. See that? And it tells me the line in my TS file, my TypeScript file, line number 28, right? It tells me this is the line that's been kicked off. Here's our, and if I actually click on it, it tells me, it shows me right inside that file which line I'm running. Right, there's our game.ts file, line 28, and it's running this main function. Okay, cool. Before we stop, I'm going to take a short break in a second. But before we stop, I'm just going to stop this for a second. I'm going to stop debugging. It's very important to stop debugging, right? We defined our main.css, but like last time, we haven't really been able to show our canvas. So for now, just so we can see our canvas, because right now it's there, but it's invisible, right? Our canvas is like white, right? So in order for us to see this, we're going to define our canvas, a rule for our canvas elements, all canvas elements that we define. We're going to make them so that there's a border, and we're going to make it so that it's, for now, we'll make it a dashed border, or that's a good one, dashed. It's going to be 1 pixel wide and black. Okay? With me? Now when I run this thing again, at the very least, we're going to see a dashed border, if things go well, around our canvas. By the way, see what I just did there? I refreshed. Sometimes you need to do that in order for you to get your changes. So you're running the web, right? It's not like you're running it inside of a console window, and you're not running it in C#. You're running it on the web, so you need to see this. This is what our canvas looks like right now. Okay, and if you notice, if I open up the JavaScript window again, JavaScript Console, which you can get to Control-Shift-J. If you press Control-Shift-J, it'll open up as well. Right? We'll get to here, and just notice game is running, which means it's going through all the steps for us. It's going through our index.html, loading up our CSS file, defining our canvas at 320 by 480, right? Loading up all of our JavaScript files. We use our typings, our type definition files, right? That to define what these classes are inside of our Easel.js, Tween.js, Sound.js, and Preload.js, our Create.js suite of libraries. And then we're loading up our Game.js file, right, which is actually our Game.ts file, our Game TypeScript file. And if you look to the right, this is our transcompiled version of the file, right? All it is just kind of compacted a little bit in one little thing. It's exactly the same right now. We haven't done any real TypeScript except for this right here. This is the only piece of TypeScript we've done, which is we've defined our data type for the stage, which is this Create.js stage object, made a reference to it. Other than that, it's almost identical. So you know JavaScript so far, like I know JavaScript, in terms of how we've made some declarations. Here we're declaring our variables with the var keyword. They're global in scope. I could put global, right, if I really want to as a name, or public. I could do that, right? But it doesn't make any sense at this particular stage for it to be public. Public works inside of a class. This isn't inside of a class, and it's assumed that the default is public for all JavaScript variable types. Okay, cool. We want to do this hello world thing again, right? But I want to add in another section up here called game variables. Just game variables, not game framework variables, but our game variables. And one of them is, I'm going to make this new, I'm going to say var, the var keyword, and I'm going to declare a new variable called my hello label, right? Make it in the global scope. And in my hello label, I'm going to make it of type createjs.text. Here's my createjs text, right? I'm not going to define it up here. I'm just saying when I do this, all I do is create a reference, right? I'm only creating a reference here. Why? I haven't really created an object yet until I use the new keyword, right? Remember, in other languages, we need to use the new keyword, C#. It's the same in JavaScript. In order for us to make a new object, we need to use the new keyword, just like we've done here. Here's an example of that, right? We're not making a new object, we're just creating a reference, right? The reference is there to help us with code hinting, and also to create this hello label variable at the global scope, right? Okay, cool. Now I can use it down here, right? So I'm going to go hello label, right, is equal to new createjs.text, right? And of course I'm going to put in there hello world, right? That's my text. And if you notice, it's giving me, let's just move this aside for a second so you can see, it's giving me code hinting. It's saying this is our string. Now it's looking for what's the next thing? Font, right? So I'm going to go comma. My font is going to be 40 pixel Consolus. That's the one I want to use. You can choose whatever you want. And then the next one is color, right? So we're going to do the same thing, color. And Mohammed couldn't tell me what yellow was last time, but that's okay. Or I mean, Mohammed. I'm saying Ali. Look, you're Muhammad Ali to me. That's what it is. Muhammad Ali, the fighter. Ali couldn't tell me the color last time. So someone pointed us, yellow was FFFF00. But now we can't use that. We're going to go 0000, make it black. sorry, and then close off our braces. All right, so what this is doing is saying, here's my hello label. I'm accessing the createjs.text class, and I'm in my constructor, the constructor of the class. This is my constructor, right? This is constructor notation, actually, right? I'm passing in this string variable or string literal, hello world, another string literal for the font, 40 pixels consoles, and a third string literal for the color, right, which is black, all right? Right now, it's not going to do anything. If I was to run it like this, even though I've created the object, let's go in there and create the object. Let's run it. Will it show hello world here? No. It won't show hello world until I add the object onto the stage. And the way to do that, of course, I'm just going to stop debugging here. The way to do that is to actually use the stage.addChild command. Now we have our stage. Stage we've defined up here. This is our stage. On the global scope, this is our stage, right? And down here, we're going to access that same variable. We're going to say stage.addChild, and we're going to say hello world, or the hello label. Now remember, when we do Cartesian coordinates for video games, right? It's 0, 0 point, right? The x and y coordinates for everything 2D video game is the top left corner of the screen, right? So if I go back to the canvas, let me just run this thing now. If everything goes well, if I've done things correctly, my hello world is going to appear here at the top left corner of the screen. Why? Because this top left corner is where 0, 0 resides. 0x, if I go to the right, as I start going to the right, my x component of this object, hello world, starts to increase, until it goes to the end, which is 320 pixels, right? And then as I go down, this is where it gets funky. When you think positive y, you think up, right? Because we think math is, our 0, 0 point in math is down here, but not so on 2D, it's up here, right? So when we start going down, actually we're going up from a y coordinate perspective. So right now it's at the 0 point until we get to 480 pixels. 480 pixels is down here. So our stage is 320 wide by 480 long, tall. Okay, if I want to move this hello world in the middle, there's a couple of things I can use. We're almost done. We're going to take a small break. I know I'm pushing you guys, right? But let me just stop debugging. So in order for me to move that, I'm just going to, in between these two lines here, right? I give some space. I'm going to go a couple things. I want to move my hello world down, but I want it to be centered. Right now, the focal point, right? If I was to run this thing again, I got to talk about this a little bit too. The focal point or registration mark of my hello world object, by the way, it looks like text. Is it text? No, it's not text. It's a bunch of pixels that look like text, right? That's all it is. I can't highlight this thing. If I kind of click and try and highlight, you try and highlight this word. You can't. Why? Because it's not text, it's pixels. This object, hello world, has a width. Right? It's been generated by the system, right? In order for me to center this, I got to measure the width of the object, right? And then center it between these two, the width of my stage. But I don't know the width of the object in pixels, right? I mean, I could try and figure it out. It's probably something about 300 pixels in that range, maybe around that 300 pixel mark, wide. And tall, my guess is probably going to be about 40 pixels tall, 40 to 43 pixels tall, something like that. So if I want to get the exact middle of this object, I have to change the registration point. The registration point is the top left corner. When you create an object, right, from scratch for the very first time, I just want you to remember this. The registration mark for all objects you create, all display objects that go on the stage, is the top left corner of the object, just like it is for the stage, right? In order for you to change the registration point to the middle, you got to use the regx and regY properties. So let's do that. Let's go back over here. I'm going to say hello label.regx. If you notice, it comes up in our tooling. Our registration mark, I want to say that it's the hello label. And we're going to use our get measured width get measured width method that's built in, right? So it says, tell me how big this thing, how many pixels? Well, if I say the measured width is going to be right to the right, I want half of the measured width, so it's in the middle, right? So times 0.5. Please, whatever you do when it comes to games, one of the things to note is you don't want to divide as much as possible. Division is a little bit heavier in terms of cycles than multiplication. So dividing by 2, which you could put here, right, a little heavier than multiplying by half. Same thing, right? So try and multiply wherever you can. Let's do the same thing for our registration mark on the y-axis. Hello label.reg y, our registration mark, is equal to hello label.get measured height, right? And then multiply that by 0.5. Okay, cool. So we've done that. We've registered the point. So now when we go back to this, right, our registration mark is right in the middle somewhere. Okay. We haven't moved it yet. And I haven't run the changes yet. Okay, cool. I want this this thing to be centered, and I know that the width of my canvas right now is set to 320 pixels. That means the middle is 160 pixels, right? So I will say this: hello label.x, the x coordinate, is going to start at 160 pixels. That's going to be right in the middle now, right? Let's just leave it like that and see what happens for us. So you can see the changes. I'm going to refresh, and when it comes up, now you see that hello world is exactly in the middle, right? There's a problem though. See how it hugs the top, right? That's because I've changed the registration point to the middle, so it's pushing it higher. I want to move it down into the middle of our screen, and we know that 480 pixels is where approximately where the middle of our screen is. Or sorry, that's the length, the width, the length of our entire canvas is 480 pixels, which means the middle of our screen is 240 pixels. So let's use that. So I'm going to say hello label. Oh, let's stop debugging. Sometimes I forget to do that. Hello label dot y is equal to 240, right? Okay, that should position everything in the exact center. It should move this thing down to here, approximately, in the middle of our canvas, to center it. Right? Let's run it. There it is. Are you with me? All I'm doing is moving this object around, right? So it's approximately in the middle of our screen, right? Now, here's a problem. Does it look like it's exactly in the middle of your screen? It looks a little bit down, doesn't it? You know why?
Because it starts from the middle because of the size of the text.
The size, the way it's measuring things, it's 40 pixels, right? But it's not measuring things properly. So just I'm warning you, sometimes what happens is these built-in functions get measured width, get measured line height. Oh, that's why. I used the wrong function. Instead of get measured height, I used get measured line height. That's wrong. So let's change this to get measured height. Huh? Come on. Really?
I think it would be 200.
Come on. Let's see. Oh man, what happened? How come it looks the same, right? Well, the reason for that is because we think that the measured width height is approximately 40, but it's measuring it a little differently, right? And that's what's happening. And also, which one is it measuring? Is it measuring the top for the W? How is it doing it? And sometimes this is what happens, right? So just letting you know, right, that sometimes these built-in functions don't work properly, right? The registration mark is slightly off. So if you want to go up a little bit, probably going to be like something like 220. Oops. 220 might be better, slightly. If you want to go right in the middle. If I refresh now, it'll go a little higher, right? Approximately. Why? Half the width, right? Half the width. Are you with me? All right, so all we've done is we've moved this hello world. Now to keep up, for people who haven't been able to keep up, because I went too fast, I'm going to create a new GitHub repository just to go to GitHub. Remember last time we did this? In my GitHub repository, I'm going to go plus to create a new repository. Inside here, I'm going to call this COMP397, and it's lesson 02, part 2, right? Create my repository. I need to get this URI. I'm going to copy this URI here, copy, I'm going to go back into this, stop debugging. I'm going to go into Team Foundation server, right, or the Team Foundation, and click on Changes. And if you notice, whoa, there's all these changes we made, right? And I also have some 3 untracked files. I want to add all these untracked files in. I want everything to be tracked, right? On the top, I want to enter a commit statement that says created create.js boilerplate, right? Commit. I'm going to go home. I'm going to go to unsync commits. I'm going to drop in my URI, the one I just created, and click publish. Okay, cool. If you go up to my GitHub now, worst case scenario, if I refresh, all my changes, everything we've done up to date is here, right? Inside my index.html as an example, all that stuff we talked about is here. So worst case, if you haven't been able to follow along, or if you want to have the data files we've been working on, they're right here, okay? You can also, one thing to do is if you don't want to type all that again and make your own repository, as an example, one thing you can do with GitHub is fork me. Now, bear with me, I know it sounds weird, but you can fork me on GitHub. If you click fork on my, and when you're logged into your own GitHub, if you go to my GitHub, which is my last name, Tsiliopoulos/COMP397 lesson 2 part 2, and click fork, what that'll do is it'll create a copy of my stuff into your repository, right? Let's pause it there for a bit of a break, 5 minutes, get a little bit of a bio break happening, and we'll come back and continue.